This book is about a young man who works in a corporate environment who through unusual circumstances becomes an actor in a large-scale movie production with Kate Winslet, Alan Rickman, Daniel Day-Lewis and Tilda Swinton. And it starts off in the middle of the corporate world. It had been a long month of report writing, business planning and client engagement. There were always peaks and troughs, with the downturns accompanied by messages from the executive about changing the way we were working, increasing productivity and being more consultative. We were now in the middle of a lull, hopefully before things picked up again. Times of slower than usual business activity lowered team morale. There wasn't much to do and it gave rise to a lack of enthusiasm for work friendships and the future. It also gave staff, I think, an opportunity to consider their long-term futures and position themselves to be kept on no matter what happened. I suppose that's what office work is all about, Machiavellian maneuvers to ensure your survival. I didn't put enough thought or planning into my career as I should have. Someone once said to me, you really need to think about your performance and how you come across. I was considering these things, standing at the printer waiting for some reports, when one of the directors introduced me to a new employee. She couldn't have been more than 25. She was starting in the contracts team. I didn't know we were taking on new people. The message from above had always been things were pretty tight, so I thought it would be more likely some of us would be let go. Just as we were about to start a conversation, the printer jammed and the lights came on. I thought it was going to be awkward, but the situation turned out to be an icebreaker. The new girl laughed and said, well, doesn't that always happen? The director was in a hurry to get to a meeting that had already started, no doubt nervous he may miss something important. He was carrying a giant takeaway coffee. The director asked whether I could introduce the new girl, Claire, to the rest of the floor. After he'd hurried off, she leant over the machine and read out the model name and number, a Ricoh RMFD 780. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Claire said she knew the model and asked if I'd mind if she had a look. I told her to be my guest because I was hopeless with them. They only seem to break down when I'm near them, I joked. And Claire knelt and opened a panel. She pulled a lever and looked inside the machine. This is the first of Ricoh's new generation of multifunction devices, she explained. They've done a complete redesign. Claire seemed to know what she was talking about. She reached in and pulled out the paper that had caused the blockage. The warning lights went off and she shut the doors. The machine shook. The display told us it was cleaning itself and we should wait. Unfortunately, as soon as the self-cleaning operation had finished, the warning lights came on again. I suggested that the paper jam, although cleared, had perhaps caused a more serious problem. Claire asked what brand of paper the company used. I said I'd never noticed. I walked to the compactus where the paper was stored and showed her a new ream. She shook her head and frowned. You should never use generic brand paper on complicated multifunction devices, she said. Even if you fan out the sheets before loading them into the tray, they can become stuck and jam the feeding points. No-name paper is fine for low volume jobs or home printers, but it should never be used in expensive machines pushing out thousands of pages a day. Any short-term savings are illusory when you have to pay for a service call every few days. I knew the contract with the Ricoh reseller included a set number of service calls, but in the last few months since the machine had been installed, it seemed every other day a technician in a red Ricoh polo shirt was pulling apart the device and fixing it. The new girl said the instruction manual recommends brands and types of paper, but ultimately it's up to the users to decide. After the drama with the RMFD 780, I introduced Claire to the rest of the team. I could tell that everyone was surprised we had someone new starting. After the introductions, I called the service number and was told someone would be there in half an hour. I thought that was pretty responsive. Claire said Ricoh's after-sales service was the best around. So that's like the setup, beginning of the book. I'll skip forward about 60 pages to a short section of the book where the narrator is about to go into rehearsal to start work on a movie called The Secret Rider. As I was about to go through the door to rehearsal studio A, I was shocked when a man leapt across my path and pulled me into a corner. He was about 60, a little overweight, with long, rangy grey hair and a heavy beard. He was wearing an old-fashioned three-piece suit, a fob chain dropped from a tiny pocket. The man was from another century, either that or he was completely mad. He whispered in my ear. I could feel his whiskers against the side of my face. It's Daniel, he said. Daniel Day-Lewis. I could hardly believe my eyes. Only a few weeks ago, he looked lean and fit. He was now transformed into a man from another time, completely unrecognizable. Daniel was, of course, Karl Marx. Day-Lewis welcomed me to my first film project. He wanted me to understand from this moment on, and for the duration of the production, he wouldn't be able to interact with me as he would when he wasn't working. He was in a hurry, but nevertheless briefly explained his approach to the method. Daniel would become his character totally. I will be Karl Marx, he said. If I am rude or difficult at any time, he said, it's not me, but Marx. I ask that you respect my artistic process and how I approach the characterization. Anyway, he concluded, there'll be plenty of time to catch up after we're finished. He told me to break a leg, just as Claire had done before our presentation to the executive. Inside the large rehearsal room, 4 people were sitting on chairs set out in a circle. There were no cameras or film production equipment. I walked toward the chair with my name on it. Kate Winslet stood up, smiled, and offered me her hand. She graciously welcomed me to the entertainment industry. James rose and put his arms around me in a generous show of affection. Daniel was going over the script, muttering to himself in German. A woman with red hair raised her eyes and looked at me briefly, perhaps dismissively. It was Tilda Swinton. I recognized her from the advertising for The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, a movie based on the children's novel by C.S. Lewis. So that's Nick Clements, the narrator's sort of introduction to his superstar colleagues. I might just read another short piece. Unfortunately, I have to. I've got to go to work. In the future, it's different. Like we need to work and like have lunch and go to meetings and it's crap like that.
If you can keep going for another minute or two.
Absolutely.
I would love
that. This skips forward to a bit where the first section of the shoot of this movie that the narrator has become involved in has concluded. The Pinewood shoot took nearly 4 weeks. I hadn't understood the complexity of the bridging scenes or how long it would take to film Kate's solo appearances. These were surely the most demanding of the entire production. I watched her reveal Azaroff's profound vulnerability, loneliness, and desperation. Kate's method was, it seemed to me, to carefully build Victoria over a number of takes. You might describe it as creating a framework of internal desolation, then using that as the structure for the full characterization. It was the performance of a great artist portraying another at work that had become increasingly central to Azaroff's existence as she saw her life fall away. They were touching moments. It prompted me to think again about the process of building a character and how, in certain circumstances and with the right experience, the gap between what is real and what is performance can disappear entirely. I was contemplating these layers of complexity when the director called us together, cast and crew, to inform us we were ready to move on to the gypsy sequences. We will start the day after tomorrow. However, before we start, I have an announcement to make. We have secured the services of Alan Rickman to play Henry Gallagher. This is a very short section from the wrap party after the Pinewood scenes have concluded. I must say it's quite. I'm sure you all get this, but it's tricky to work through a whole novel and pull out short sequences that might sort of make some kind of sense without knowing the novel completely. It was at the party that Daniel asked me what I thought of the movie industry. However, rather than answering such a difficult question, I asked how he could so easily switch off from Marx. I was interested to know how, having so profoundly taken on the character, Daniel could shed it and return so quickly to his true self. Well, he said, I have no idea what a true self is. We all play parts in life, don't we? We all wear masks, especially around people we are not so close to, and sometimes even around those with whom we are most intimate. And we always take on a role, even if that role is the self. I must admit, he continued, it was not an easy thing to lose Karl. And I had a similarly difficult time with Abraham Lincoln. Of course, Daniel continued, as an artist, there are always highs and lows, but I've learned to live with them over the years. Then Daniel made an interesting comment I've never forgotten. He critiqued my performance, or perhaps it was me. From where he was standing, both as Day-Lewis and Marx, he felt my performance was not a performance at all. It's almost like he said, you were Friedrich Engels before you came anywhere near the movie and even before you read the screenplay. In fact, you could say the project has benefited from having the real Engels play himself. Nick, he promised, I mean this as a compliment. As far as I'm concerned, yours is the greatest supporting characterization I've ever seen. I was encouraged by Daniel's description of my acting. While of course I'd made an effort to learn my lines and think carefully about the great German thinker, his role in the story and how he should interact with the other characters, I'd found it a relatively straightforward process, even an involuntary one. From the moment I agreed to audition for the film and do the screen test, I'd increasingly felt myself disappearing and being replaced by the voice of Engels and James's text. This is what James is the director. This is what James had been so strongly concerned about, the primacy of the text as opposed to the performance, and finding the right balance between the two.